Thank you, Madam Speaker. A few weeks ago, I asked the government when it would rein in its inflationary spending and balance the budget to bring down inflation and give Canadian homeowners interest rate relief. The parliamentary secretary took a cheap shot at the Conservative Party leader, but the main meat of his response needs some unpacking. He referred to his government supposedly working with the City of Calgary, and that point needs correcting. In the case of the City of Calgary, the minister that the parliamentary secretary speaks for wrote a threatening letter to the Mayor of Calgary demanding that the City Council take a specific vote on a specific proposal or lose housing accelerated funding. They weren't working with the City of Calgary, they were threatening the city, and it's a classic my way or the highway type move, one that they have sadly also undertaken with other municipalities. And I'd like to contrast that approach with the housing plan that has already been partly tabled in the House of Commons by the Conservative Party's leader, the Building Homes Not Bureaucracy Act. So under the Conservative plan, the federal government would tie municipal funding to outcomes, not by sticking their nose into municipal government's business. A Conservative government approach would respect municipal decision-making. It would simply tie national government funding to national policy objectives, and increasing the national housing supply is a critical national policy imperative. But the question that I asked remains unanswered. Under the NDP Liberal government, interest rates have gone through the roof. Even the government's own experts and all kinds of random Liberals have affirmed, without any doubt, that the government's spending and borrowing are contributing to inflation. Former Liberal finance ministers like Bill Morneau and John Manley have clearly said that the government is losing the battle against inflation because it keeps pouring gasoline on the inflationary fire. Current and former governors of the Bank of Canada have also weighed in with concern about how this government's spending and deficits make inflation worse. So the finance minister herself even admitted this earlier this year, that her government was going to have to rein in its spending to fight inflation. But then she tabled a fall economic statement with more spending, more taxes, more borrowing, and more deficits, which means more inflation and higher interest rates. Inflation has been called the cruelest tax ever. It robs workers of the value of their wages. It robs savers of the value of their savings. And it robs seniors of the value of their pensions. So inflation is crushing Canadians and lower-income retirees with higher interest rates, and higher interest rates threaten mortgagors and threaten to suppress housing construction. They even threaten the entire financial system, Madam Speaker, because of the weight of mortgage asset balances. So Canadians can't afford the homes that they already own in many cases because they were forced to buy at peak prices that were bid up by a lack of supply, and now their mortgages are maturing at shockingly high rates. So under this government's watch, some were even forced into fixed payment variable rate mortgages because at the very peak of prices, qualifying calculations actually made it more advantageous to do so. So people were just trying to put a roof over their head, and they had to take on these riskier mortgages just to get into a home. And now they have negatively amortizing mortgages where their balance the balance owing is increasing. And now they're having to make either giant payments of principal or face huge increases on their payments. But they don't have any extra money, Madam Speaker. People are desperately worried they're going to lose their homes, and observers worry that the banking system itself is at risk. So I ask again, when will this government rein in its deficits, reduce its wasteful spending, get inflation under control so that interest rates can come down and so Canadians can afford to keep a roof over their own head and builders can afford to build?
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Housing, Infrastructure and Communities.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. The challenges we're facing are complex and multifaceted. There is no simple solution. This is a nationwide issue that can only be solved with close cooperation between partners in every sector and all levels of government. After decades of absence at the housing table, this government has stepped up and assumed a leadership role. To this end, I'm happy to remind members what the Government of Canada is doing for Canadians and the solutions we've put forward for Canadians to find homes they can afford and improve communities across the country. On housing, we're taking a practical approach to increase the supply of all types of homes. We have to look at the housing challenge holistically. As I said, this is multifaceted with a range of factors that requires participation from all concerned. We're talking about shelters, transitional housing, community housing, affordable rental housing, and more. Each of these comes with its own unique set of challenges. So with that in mind, we're attacking it from all angles. To get more homes built, we're working with partners directly or indirectly involved in the housing sector. That includes provinces, Indigenous governments, municipalities, and private and community sectors. Thanks to various programs under the National Housing Strategy, many projects have been started in my colleague city of Calgary. One such example is the Sheriff King Home Women's Shelter. By working with the Government of Alberta, we were able to double the number of available spaces. Another example is the Temple Mount Place and Gardens Residence, which opened last spring. This 120-unit affordable housing project for seniors provides 50 affordable housing units and 70 supportive housing units, where residents have access to on-site doctors and nurses. This housing complex was made possible thanks to contributions from the National Housing Co-Investment Fund and the Canada-Alberta National Housing Strategy Bilateral Agreement and the Seed Funding Program. No doubt this initiative demonstrates the success that comes through a concentrated approach, and this is the approach we're taking to get more homes built more quickly. This government invests to ensure greater equity across the country, and it's essential to making a difference for all Canadians. Thank you.
The honourable member for Calgary Rocky Ridge.
Well, Madam Speaker, he still hasn't answered my question. When are they going to rein in the spending, rein in their deficits, so that they'll get inflation under control, so that interest rates can come down, so that Canadians can get on with living their lives and not have to deal with the catastrophic effects of the inflationary and high interest rate environment that they've created. People's payments are in some cases doubling, Madam Speaker. It is normal now for a maturing mortgage to add $700 or $800 or more a month to people's payments. They can't afford it. They can't afford to keep the homes they're in. So I didn't hear an answer to his question. I heard him name tick a couple of announcements of funding and openings. But that comes amid the need for millions of new housing construction in the years to come. And the answer that I got is not going to cut it for the needs of Canadian housing, and certainly will give no relief to existing Canadian mortgage holders, which is the substance of the question that I had asked.
Parliamentary Secretary.
We have the lowest, Madam Speaker, we have the lowest deficit in the G7. We have a AAA credit rating, and all this member wants to do is cut. Last week, him and the Conservative leader voted against measures that are creating 86,000 new apartments for Canadians, including over 15,000 deeply affordable homes. They voted against emergency shelters for women and girls. They voted against veterans experience homelessness. All this party wants to do, Madam Speaker, is cut. They were absent when they were in government last, and they think cutting more will build more houses. Madam Speaker, they're absolutely wrong. We're in strong financial shape, and we're going to invest in Canadians. They're reckless, Madam Speaker. We have Canadians' backs.